Chapter 7. Soggy Daffodils. Approaching my junior school gates on Friday, 11th of March 1983, I had no reason to suspect this day would be different to any other. Yet, for the most unexpected of reasons, this particular day would turn out to be one I'd never forget. Having taken the register, my teacher, a tall and handsome man by the name of Mr. Harrington, closed it and stood up. Usually at this point, Mr. Harrington would walk over to the blackboard, then sit down in front of it and proceed to pick his nose. Unconcerned by the grimacing faces of his class, he'd select a plum bogey and, after examining it for a few moments, proceed to pop it in his mouth. However, on this day, he began by drawing our attention to the absence of Elizabeth, the horse-loving, recorder-playing object of my affection, still going out with my best friend Dale. Appearing solemn in his manner and tone of voice, Mr. Harrington announced that the previous evening, Elizabeth had been knocked down by a car while crossing the road opposite her home. Upon hearing these words, suddenly my heart leapt into my mouth, while others around the class gasped. Mr. Harrington went on to explain that while Elizabeth's injuries were not life-threatening, she'd be spending the next few days in Maidstone's West Kent Hospital. Following the dreadful news, our third-year class spent the rest of the day in a state of shock and disbelief. Upon arriving home, the tears I'd suppressed all day overwhelmed me, and no sooner had I put my bag down on the floor than I began sobbing uncontrollably. While not completely lacking in a capacity to console, I'd find my mother in this instance gentle and kind in a way I'd never known her before or since. Having cuddled me until my sobs had subsided, she suggested I go into the garden and pick a large handful of the daffodils among those which had recently sprung up. Following my return to the kitchen, my mother explained that she'd phoned the hospital and was advised that I could stay with Elizabeth until visiting hours were over at 8 p.m. With this, she put the money for the return bus fare in my hand and packed me off to the hospital. Soaked to the skin, having been caught in a downpour, and with a bunch of wilted daffodils in hand, I presented myself at the foot of Elizabeth's bed. Sporting a doozy of a black eye, she remained in good enough humour to remark on how funny I looked as I came through the ward door all wet and carrying a handful of soggy daffodils. That night, Elizabeth's father dropped me home, and it came as a great relief to overhear him explaining to my mother that once his daughter's fractured pelvis had knitted back together, she'd be as right as rain. 18 months had passed since we'd moved into our current home, a rented semi-detached house in a quiet cul-de-sac named South Crescent. Our move to South Crescent came about, as did most things, at the insistence of my mother. Preceding this was the disclosure from a wealthy insurance client of my father's, a man by the name of Mr. Judge, that a tenant in one of his properties had recently been diagnosed with a terminal illness and a short prognosis. In his desire for a quick turnaround, Mr. Judge proceeded to ask my father if he would like first refusal. After viewing the house in question, a mock Tudor cottage nestled in a valley in the nearby village of Boughton-Monchelsea during a brief drive-by, my mother decided we'd all be much happier living there. Consequently, for the purposes of a speedy move once Mr. Judge's ailing tenant had died, and on my mother's whim, my parents sold our house at Georgian Drive, following which we moved to South Crescent. Yet, 18 months later, Mr. Judge's stricken tenant remained alive. Therefore, my father thought it wise to put himself and my mother on the property ladder once again. Remaining in the village of Cox Heath, their purchase of a 3-bedroom terraced house represented my 5th move in 8 years. Characterised by one considerable disadvantage and one consolatory advantage, in late 1983 we moved into yet another new home. Similar to our home in Georgian Drive, for our move to the new home in Chestnut Drive, my mother once again insisted on the installation of a split-level cooker. As to the obvious disadvantage, this came in the form of my bedroom, which would be in a rather dilapidated-looking wooden conservatory attached to the rear of the house. Worse still, while I'd be at one end of the conservatory, at the other was situated my father's office. With Dee having shared a room with Sass for the previous 6 years and approaching 13 herself, she had more than paid her dues and needed her own space. Yet, while the prospect of being separated from everyone else at night didn't exactly fill me with glee, I soon overcame my disappointment when I realised that in the next street to us lived my good friend Dale. Following this latest move, the spring term of 1984 would see my class bid farewell to the nose-picker Mr. Harrington and welcome a new teacher into our fourth-year class. Prior to the arrival of our new teacher, our headmistress, the formidable Mrs. Levick, paid our class an unexpected visit. Departing from her characteristically formal manner, Mrs. Levick explained to the class that in addition to being a good friend of hers, our new teacher, a lady by the name of Mrs. Stapleton, was very overweight and cautioned us to remain respectful. Suffice to say that her caveat was unnecessary, as Mrs. Stapleton, with the kind of warmth and care so sorely lacking in teachers of the time, charmed her way into the hearts of her young charges with considerable ease. Indeed, so assured did I feel of Mrs. Stapleton's care and compassion that I found myself sitting before her one morning break time. While the rest of the class ran around the playground with abandon, I shared with Mrs. Stapleton the intimate details of the previous 8 years of my life. From Bill Stone to Steve, and from my mother's violence to my turbulent relationship with my father, she listened sympathetically as I spoke. Much like a similarly gentle teacher I'd encounter a few months later during my first term at secondary school, Mrs. Stapleton stood apart from the surly and slap-happy teachers which was so commonplace at that time. Regrettably, said surly and slap-happy teachers were two a penny come September when I finally joined D at Cornwallis Secondary School. Situated in the adjoining village of Linton, reaching Cornwallis involved a daily 3-mile walk. On the first day, the first-year pupils gathered in the lower school assembly hall where we were divided into our respective classes. With each class sat in rows, one behind the other, I sat in silence and stared at the back of an unknown classmate's head until such time as our form teacher came to collect us. During the 2 years I'd spent at Cornwallis, a French teacher by the name of Miss Baker would be my form teacher. Besides being petite in stature, Miss Baker's two most prominent characters were her heavy lisp and thick blue eyeshadow, which appeared to have been applied using a trowel. Each class year from the first through to the 5th year were divided into one of 4 houses. Expecting to be placed in the same house as D, named Monchelsea, instead I found myself in another house named Wayfarers, or Gay Fairies as we were otherwise known. Yet it wouldn't be too long before I realised that despite some menacing-looking characters among the upper school kids, the biggest bullies at Cornwallis were in fact the teachers. Undoubtedly, it felt rather odd at first to refer to the teachers as Sir and Ma'am. Much like Coxheath Jr., kind and compassionate teachers were in very short supply, with ill-tempered characters very much in the majority. Two of the most fearsome teachers among the staff I'd encounter in successive years. The first, an overweight and perpetually bad-tempered woman by the name of Miss Burkitt, or Birdshit as she was otherwise known, I'd encounter as my first-year music teacher. Similarly, an equally bad-tempered man by the name of Mr. Greenslade I'd encounter as my science teacher in my second year. Sporting scruffy hair and a goatee beard, Mr. Greenslade resembled the television character Catweasel. Possessed of a wicked aim to rival that of my mother, Mr. Greenslade needed no excuse to throw the blackboard rubber across the room, or cane someone's buttocks with a meter ruler, or thrash them with the rubber hose connected to a Bunsen burner, or simply slap them around the face. Despite the overall strictness, I'd readily indulge my own attention-seeking urge to make others laugh by seizing the opportunity to be the class comedian where I thought I could get away with it. Nonetheless, there was one man whom I wouldn't have even dared to think of crossing, in the form of the forbidding Mr. Andrews, head of the lower school. Following the first registration with Miss Baker, the boys were sent back to the lower school hall for a talk from Mr. Andrews. Like a drill sergeant barking at a group of young cadets, Mr. Andrews addressed the first-year boys from the hall stage. While standing beneath him, we listened as he proceeded to remind us of the school's strict uniform policy and how we were not to remove our ties in the summer until he'd done so first. Consequently, during those odd occasions when Mr. Andrews actually removed his tie, news of the rare event spread through the lower school corridors like wildfire. In addition to the overabundance of strict and ill-tempered teachers, arguably the most hardening experience at Cornwallis was school showers. With the boys in winter playing football and rugby on the field in the pouring rain, our reward for doing so would be communal showering in the freezing sports hall changing rooms. While our male PE teachers looked on, approximately 50, mostly prepubescent boys caked in mud, collectively froze to death under tepid water before rushing to dress amid the chill of the changing room. Perhaps more devastating to most than the bitter temperatures was the curious sight of the odd boy who'd already begun puberty, while the rest of us had to wait a few more months in anguished expectation for hair to appear on our genitals and our balls to drop. Menacing teachers and Baltic showers aside, like Mrs. Stapleton at my junior school, I'd find one teacher with whom I'd instantly connect in the form of my English teacher, Mrs. Firth. Having joined the staff during the year prior to my arrival, Mrs. Firth had already earned a reputation among pupils of being a soft touch. While I'd seized the opportunity in her class to indulge in my usual smutty banter, I found myself experiencing a sense of empathy for Mrs. Firth on account of one unfortunate physical characteristic. Around this time, Mrs. Firth had endured a particularly stressful divorce, which had left her with a noticeable bald patch on the crown of her head. While it was certainly within my capabilities to mock teachers for their appearance, I could not collude with those who, within her earshot, would so cruelly refer to Mrs. Firth by the nickname Baldy. While meeting Mrs. Firth again many years later, she revealed how she was fully aware of the unfortunate tag and disclosed the circumstances surrounding her sudden hair loss. With Mrs. Firth's love of the printed word remaining undiminished, I admitted my regret at not having paid more attention in her class and how I too had come to share in her perpetual love of words. Although I'd clocked him for the first time while we were all sat on the lower school hall floor waiting for Miss Baker, it was during our first English lesson that I'd become properly aware of a classmate by the name of Stuart. What made Stuart stand out was that he and I were the only ones in our class who showed up on our first day wearing a blazer. Consequently, having realised we were in a minority, we soon put our blazers to the back of our respective wardrobes. Yet, when Stuart arrived late to our first English class with a tear-stained face at having lost his way, I knew instantly that I wanted to be his friend. An academically bright boy, Stuart would leave Cornwallis for grammar school 2 years later. However, in the meantime, Stuart and I would become good mates while forming part of a slightly larger group of friends. Made up of fellow classmates, our group consisted of Justin, a boy whose lankiness made him appear older and, therefore, ideal for buying cigarettes, along with Penny, whose parents ran a village pub, and Simone, an overweight yet pleasant girl whose father was a police officer. Despite our occasional ribbing of Simone, she'd show her mettle as a friend and come to my rescue 4 years later in perhaps the most desperate moment of my entire childhood. As for Dee, she too had made conscious choices when it came to her friends, albeit with one peculiarity. Being somewhat of an anomaly was the pairing of Dee and another girl in her class by the name of Angela. A precocious girl with large breasts and an attitude to match, Angela's reputation preceded her. With a penchant for fighting and readily back-chatting teachers, Angela was the polar opposite of the shy and retiring Dee. Despite their opposing characters, Dee and Angela would become the best of friends. Remaining curious as to their coupling, I'd asked Dee many years later what drew her to Angela. To this she replied that on account of the shit going on at home, she didn't want any trouble at school. Consequently, with Angela by her side, Dee ensured she'd be as safe as houses during her time at Cornwallis. On the other hand, the house in which we were both less safe remained our own. While a relative tranquility belied the next chaotic episode to come, the abnormalities of my mother's behaviour continued unabated. Indeed, my father was not the only one who'd walk around at times with next to nothing on. Giving him a run for his money, my mother would make a similarly immodest attempt to cover up, courtesy of the single petticoat she'd so often wear while sitting around the house. Similarly audacious at this time was my mother's antics with a fellow work colleague of my father. Like Mum, my father had no real friends except a fellow insurance agent by the name of Clive. With Dad being much more organised in his accounts than his friend, Clive would visit each time he needed Dad's help to balance his books. A taller and stockier man than my dad, and with an unabashedly juvenile sense of humour, Clive revelled in winding my father up. Enlisting my mother in the kind of shenanigans in which she'd be only too happy to oblige, the playful pair engaged in long and lingering kisses full on the lips. Realising he was being made the butt of their joke, my father would end up ignoring them both and continue in his attempt to make sense of the mess Clive had made of his paperwork. Perhaps the most peculiar occurrence, which to this day remains unexplained, took place after my bedtime. With my birthday approaching in December of that year, like every other lad at that time, I began to produce output. While I had not disclosed this fact to my mother, its occurrence coincided with her coming into my room late at night and then waking me up to change my bedsheets. In addition to being in a state of groggy confusion at having just been roused from my slumber, I also found myself in a state of embarrassment. While attempting to mask my embarrassment with cupped hands, my humiliation would have been complete had my mother discovered the hole I'd fashioned in my mattress. Indeed, if what was to occur in the coming weeks had not taken place, I wonder on how many more occasions my mother would have woken me up in such invasive and humiliating circumstances. Nonetheless, with Dee and I both settled in secondary school and Sass by now in the infants, 1984 was gradually drawing to a close. While a famine had begun to develop in Ethiopia, the striking miners battled the police on our television screens, and the IRA attempted to assassinate Margaret Thatcher by placing a bomb in her hotel, our family was about to experience a bombshell of our own. Fresh off the school bus, Dee and I arrived home one Friday afternoon to find the house empty and our mother unexpectedly gone. As we walked into the kitchen, our eyes were immediately drawn to the casserole dish sitting on the countertop and the set of cooking instructions lying beside. While we knew this could only mean one thing, what we didn't know then was where our mother had gone, with whom, and most importantly, when we'd see her again.
Amid a sea of wrong uns, I kinda had a hunch. What's true and just lay someplace else, not with this feckless bunch. In the darkest moments of my life, earth angels knocked my door, held me in their loving arms, to feel no pain no more. Oh, you beautiful creatures showed me what was right, that it takes more strength to be gentle. Thank my ladies of the light. In my loving arms, I hold you oh so tight. I know what you need, I give it freely to you. While some were happy slappers or maimers with their speech, a different lesson I had to learn, and you had come to teach. That boy, you just ain't one of them. There's a better way to be. Our love for you will see you through. Fulfill your destiny. Oh, you beautiful creatures showed me what was right, that it takes more strength to be gentle. Thank my ladies of the light. In my loving arms, I hold you oh so tight. I know what you need, I give it freely to you. The purest diamonds in the rough, through the chaos and neglect. Now on the path to righteousness, righteousness gave me something to respect. How is it decided whose paths we're meant to cross? Well, I don't care, 'cause you were there while others couldn't give a toss. Oh, you beautiful creatures showed me what was right, that it takes more strength to be gentle. Thank my ladies of the light. In my loving arms, I hold you oh so tight. I know what you need, I give it freely to you. Oh, you beautiful creatures showed me what was right, that it takes more strength to be gentle. Thank my ladies of the light. It takes